The marble mansion of Jonathan Huxley, tech billionaire, widower and father of 4, had become a revolving door of nannies. 101 in just 4 months. They all left with trembling hands, tear-streaked faces or broken patience. No one survived a week in that house, not with those girls. His daughters weren't just mischievous. They were furious, grieving and cold. The eldest, Harper, 13, hadn't smiled since her mother's funeral. The twins, Bella and Rose, 8, spoke only to each other in whispers. And the youngest, little Daisy, 5, had stopped talking entirely. Every nanny that came through Huxley Manor thought they could fix the girls, until they realized that love didn't live there anymore. That was until she walked in. A soft-spoken black woman named Amara Johnson, dressed in a modest uniform and holding a second-hand bag. She wasn't a professional nanny, just a maid applying for a cleaning job. Jonathan almost dismissed her. "Sorry, we're looking for trained staff, not beginners." But Amara smiled gently, her eyes calm, her tone unshaken. "With respect, sir, your house doesn't need a professional. It needs healing." Jonathan froze. For the first time in months, someone had seen the truth behind the perfection. He didn't know it yet, but this woman, this humble maid, was about to change everything. And what she would do inside that cold marble mansion would become the miracle that even money couldn't buy. Amara Johnson's first morning at Huxley Manor began beneath a sky the color of steel. The air was crisp, but the house, immense, white and sterile, felt colder than the weather outside. It was the kind of place that looked perfect in magazines, but somehow felt hollow when you walked through it. The marble floors echoed, the chandeliers sparkled without warmth, and not a single picture frame held a recent smile. Jonathan Huxley, tall and impeccably dressed, greeted her at the door with a brisk nod. His voice was steady, efficient, the kind of tone used to close deals, not start relationships. "You'll start in the East Wing," he said, already half turned away. "The girls are occupied." Amara tilted her head slightly. "Occupied doing what, sir?" He hesitated, then exhaled through his nose. "Grieving, misbehaving, testing limits." "I don't know anymore." Her expression softened. "Children don't test limits, Mr. Huxley. They test love." The man blinked, taken aback. No one spoke to him like that, certainly not employees. But instead of replying, he simply adjusted his cufflinks and walked away. Amara followed the sound of faint arguing down a long hallway until she reached the playroom. The moment she opened the door, the noise hit her like a wave. The once beautiful room was a battlefield. Toys were broken, crayons shattered, and paint, bright red and green, smeared across the walls like graffiti. At the center sat 4 girls, their faces set in stubborn defiance. Harper, the eldest at 13, looked up first with a glare that could pierce stone. The twins, Bella and Rose, whispered something to each other and smirked. The youngest, Daisy, sat cross-legged in silence, her wide brown eyes watching everything. Harper crossed her arms. "You'll quit by Friday." "They all do." Amara smiled, calm and steady. "Friday? Oh no, sweetheart. I don't do quitting." Rose scoffed and hurled a paintbrush at her feet. "Then you'll run." Without missing a beat, Amara bent down, picked up the paintbrush, and dipped it into a cracked cup of blue paint. Then she walked to the wall and began to paint. "Run? Maybe, but first, let's make this mess worth it." The girls froze. No adult had ever joined their chaos before. Nannies yelled. Teachers scolded. Counselors lectured. But this woman, she painted. Slowly, she drew a small crooked flower on the wall. Bella whispered, "Is she serious?" Amara smiled without looking back. "Dead serious. But if you're going to paint, at least do it right. Come on, help me fix this rainbow. It's crying for help." One by one, curiosity chipped away at rebellion. The twins grabbed brushes. Harper hesitated, but eventually sighed and joined. Daisy just watched, her small hands gripping her stuffed rabbit. For the next hour, the room filled with color, and something else that hadn't been there in months, sound. The sound of laughter. The sound of forgiveness slowly waking up. Amara didn't direct them. She just encouraged them, told stories between strokes, and turned their chaos into art. When Daisy giggled softly, her first sound in weeks, it startled even her sisters. Harper froze, brush midair. Amara smiled gently. "What's funny, baby?" Daisy shrugged shyly. "The flower looks like a chicken." The room erupted in laughter. The kind of laughter that makes walls softer and hearts lighter. Upstairs, Jonathan heard it. He was on a conference call with Tokyo investors, his usual rhythm of control and precision, when that sound drifted up the staircase. He stopped speaking mid-sentence. It was faint but unmistakable. His daughters were laughing. For a moment, the billionaire who had everything felt a strange lump in his throat. That evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Amara tucked Daisy into bed. The little girl's curls framed her round face, and her tiny hands clutched the stuffed rabbit tight. "Are you really staying?" Daisy asked, her voice trembling like she was afraid of the answer. Amara smoothed the blanket over her. "I am, sweetheart. As long as you'll have me," the child blinked. "You're not scared of us?" Amara smiled softly, brushing a curl from Daisy's forehead. "No, baby. I've met scarier things than love." For the first time, Daisy reached out and hugged her. Amara held her close, humming a lullaby only mothers hum, the kind that comes from memories, not sheet music. Outside the door, Jonathan stood in the dim hallway, unseen. He watched through the half-open doorway as Amara whispered and tucked each child in. Something inside him cracked open. It wasn't just that the house was quiet. It was that the quiet was no longer empty. And for the first time since his wife died, Jonathan Huxley, billionaire, widower and father, felt tears rise, warm and uninvited. They weren't tears of sorrow, but of something far more dangerous to a man who'd forgotten how to feel. Hope, the house that had forgotten how to laugh, was learning again. The following week in Huxley Manor moved like a quiet transformation. What was once a museum of grief began to hum faintly with life. Amara didn't march in with authority. She drifted like sunlight through blinds, soft but impossible to ignore. She sang while dusting the grand staircase, hummed gospel hymns in the kitchen, and laughed out loud when Daisy tried to sneak extra syrup on her pancakes. Even the maids whispered that the new woman had magic in her smile. But Jonathan Huxley remained a ghost in his own mansion, present yet unreachable. His days were built on schedules and silence. The girls saw him mostly through cracked doors or at a distance, walking through hallways with a phone glued to his ear. He thought structure could fix the chaos. Amara knew structure was the cage. One evening, she decided to break it. She appeared in his office doorway, holding a tray of steaming food. "Dinner's ready, Mr. Huxley." Without looking up, he said, "Tell the chef to leave it in the kitchen. I'll eat later." Amara stepped inside, uninvited. "The chef didn't make it, I did." Cornbread and stew, family dinner. He finally looked up, confused. "Family dinners aren't on the schedule." She smiled, a little playful but firm. "Then we'll make room. Children don't bond through calendars, sir. They bond through dinner tables." Her tone wasn't defiant, it was gentle, the kind that made you question yourself rather than the other person. Jonathan hesitated, staring at her, then sighed heavily and closed his laptop. "Fine, one dinner." When they sat together, the atmosphere was painfully stiff. The girls stared at their plates. Jonathan cleared his throat once, twice, trying to think of something to say but finding nothing. Finally, Amara spoke up, her voice light. "Harper, I heard you love robotics?" The eldest looked startled. "Yeah, Mom taught me." "Before—" She stopped mid-sentence, the air tightening. Jonathan's fork clinked against his plate. The word Mom sliced through the fragile calm like a blade. Amara, without missing a beat, smiled softly. "Then maybe we can build something together." For her, that single suggestion changed everything. Harper's guarded face shifted from fear to curiosity. "Like what?" "A memory machine," Amara said. "Something that plays her favorite songs and pictures. That way she's still here whenever you miss her." For the first time, Harper nodded. The twins perked up. Daisy giggled. "Can we make it pink?" Amara winked. "Pink it is." Jonathan watched silently as the dinner table turned into an idea lab. His daughters, once mute and cold, now argued over buttons, lights and melodies. And Amara, this woman who was supposed to be just a maid, was orchestrating it all with a patience that humbled him. Over the next few days, the dining room became a workshop. Amara taught the twins how to solder safely, guided Harper in writing a small code script, and encouraged Daisy to decorate the box with stars and hearts. Every time Jonathan walked by, he found himself stopping. He started offering small suggestions, use a smaller circuit or try a lighter frame. Before long, He was sitting beside them, his shirt sleeves rolled up, smiling without realizing it. One night, long after the girls had gone to bed, Jonathan stayed behind to help Amara finish wiring the last few pieces. The room was dim, lit only by a desk lamp and the soft glow of the device. He caught himself watching her, how her hands moved with care, how her eyes softened when she talked about the girls' progress. "You're not like the others," he murmured.
She chuckled quietly. "Because I don't see broken kids, Mr. Huxley. I see hearts that forgot how to trust." Jonathan leaned back, her words sinking into him like rain on dry soil. "And what do you see in me, Ms. Johnson?" Amara looked at him steadily, her voice low but unwavering. "A man who built walls so high, he forgot why he was protecting them." The words landed between them like truth they both already knew. For a moment, neither spoke. The air buzzed with something fragile, something that wasn't romance, not yet, but the beginning of understanding. Jonathan finally looked down, exhaling softly. "You talk like you've known pain." Amara smiled, faint but wistful. "You can't help others find light if you've never stood in the dark." He studied her face, the calm strength behind it, the mystery in her eyes. For years, he'd surrounded himself with professionals, psychologists, consultants, tutors. But this woman, with no fancy degrees and no polished resume, was the first to reach the unreachable parts of his family, and him. Before heading to bed, he paused at the door. "You're changing things here, Ms. Johnson." Amara wiped her hands and turned to him. "Not changing, sir. Just reminding. Every home still remembers how to be a home. It just needs a little grace." He gave a small nod, unable to reply. That night, Jonathan Huxley lay awake longer than usual. The mansion felt quieter, but no longer empty. From down the hall, he could hear faint giggles, a whisper of bedtime prayers, and Amara's soft voice singing the girls to sleep. For the first time in years, he didn't dread the morning the man made of rules was beginning to bend, and the woman made of grace was teaching him how. Rain fell hard against the tall windows of Huxley Manor that evening, its rhythmic tapping echoing through the corridors like a ghost's lullaby. The house that had begun to bloom again with laughter now seemed wrapped in a quiet melancholy. The storm had a way of bringing memories back, especially the kind Jonathan tried so hard to bury. Harper, the eldest, wandered through the dimly lit hallways, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floor. She was looking for her father. After weeks of small smiles and shared dinners, she wanted to show him something, her finished design for the memory machine. But she found him somewhere she hadn't seen him in months. The old study. It had been her mother's favorite room. The walls still smelled faintly of jasmine and old books. Dust lay thick over the grand piano and the framed photos that lined the shelves, photos of a time when smiles came easily. Harper stood at the doorway, clutching her sketchpad, as her father sat motionless behind the desk, staring at a single photograph. It was of her mother, radiant and laughing, holding a much younger Daisy in her arms. "You miss her?" Harper's voice was small, like she wasn't sure she should speak at all. Jonathan didn't turn. He simply nodded. "Every day." She took a hesitant step forward. "Then why'd you get rid of her stuff?" His back stiffened. His hand trembled slightly on the frame. He didn't answer. "Mom wouldn't want you to forget her," Harper whispered. Jonathan finally looked up, his eyes rimmed red. "That's the problem, Harper. I can't forget her. Every time I see her things, I fall apart." His voice cracked, the pain spilling out despite himself. Harper's own eyes welled with tears. "Then you're not the only one." She turned and ran before he could say anything more, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Swallowed by thunder later that night, Amara found her sitting halfway up the grand staircase, knees tucked to her chest, tears streaking her face. The flicker of candlelight from the hall lamps softened the girl's profile. "He doesn't care," Harper sobbed as Amara approached. "He just moved on like she never existed." Amara sank down beside her, her voice gentle as silk. "Oh, honey, adults don't move on. We move forward. It's how we survive." Harper sniffed. "Then why won't he talk about her?" "Because love leaves big shadows, baby. Some people are afraid of standing in them too long." Amara brushed the girl's hair behind her ear, then cupped her chin so their eyes met. "You can't heal pain by hiding it. And neither can he." That night, when the thunder eased and the house settled into its midnight quiet, Amara made a decision. She entered the forbidden study. The air inside was heavy, untouched for too long. Dust swirled as she opened the curtains. Then, With the soft grace of someone who understood grief, she began to clean, not out of duty, but reverence. She lit candles across the room, set fresh flowers from the garden in a vase, and gathered the girls from their rooms one by one. They came hesitantly, unsure what she was doing. "Tonight," Amora said softly, arranging family photos on the desk, "we remember her." Rose frowned. "But Dad doesn't want." "He will," Amora interrupted gently. "He just doesn't know how." They lit candles together. The flames flickered in their wide eyes, reflecting loss and love all at once. Amora asked each girl to say one thing they remembered about their mother. "Her pancakes," Bella said shyly. "They were shaped like hearts." "She smelled like flowers," whispered Rose. Harper hesitated, her voice cracking. "She said I could build anything if I believed in it." Amora's eyes glistened. "Then you've already made her proud, sweetheart." When Jonathan finally walked in, he stopped cold at the door. The scene before him was something he hadn't seen since the funeral, his daughters together, smiling through tears, holding candles in front of their mother's pictures. "Amora," his voice was barely a whisper. She turned to him, her expression calm but kind. "Say something to her, sir. Anything." His lips parted, but no words came. The weight of years pressed against his chest, heavy and suffocating. Finally, his voice broke free, trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought shutting it away would make it hurt less." Harper's candle shook in her hand as tears spilled freely. She ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You don't have to be sorry, Dad. We just wanted to remember her, with you." He hugged her back, and in seconds the twins and Daisy joined, their small arms clutching at his coat, their sobs muffled against his chest. Jonathan held them all tightly, eyes closed, as if afraid they'd vanish if he let go. Amora turned away quietly, letting them have the moment. Her own tears slipped down her cheeks, not of sorrow, but of peace. She whispered under her breath, "Rest easy now. They are finding their way." Outside, the storm began to fade. The wind slowed, the thunder softened to a distant murmur. In its place came a quiet that didn't feel heavy anymore. That night, the house finally breathed again. Not in silence, but in peace. And for the first time in years, the ghosts that haunted the hallways of Huxley Manor were not memories of loss, but whispers of love returning home. The morning light touched the mansion like a hesitant guest, golden, warm, yet unsure it was welcome. But this morning, something had changed. The walls that once echoed with silence now carried a rhythm, laughter, music, and the scent of homemade pancakes. Amora stood in the kitchen, wearing her floral apron, humming an old gospel tune. Daisy was on a stool beside her, stirring batter with messy enthusiasm. The twins were setting the table, arguing playfully about who got the special spoon. Harper, though still pale from a fainting spell, sat by the window sketching something, her pencil dancing across the page like she was sketching hope itself. Jonathan Huxley paused in the doorway, a coffee cup in hand, frozen. He didn't recognize this scene. For months, his mornings had been alarms, schedules, and corporate calls. Now, there was music and love. "Good morning, Daddy." Daisy chirped, splattering pancake batter on the counter. He laughed softly, an unfamiliar sound even to himself. "Good morning, sunshine." Amora looked up and smiled, the kind of smile that had no agenda. "Just peace. You're just in time. We're making pancakes with hearts." He raised an eyebrow. "Hearts." She nodded, because this house was missing them. That line hit him deeper than he expected. He watched as Amora flipped the pancakes with gentle confidence. Every movement she made was steady, patient, as if she'd done this her whole life, not just for a paycheck but for something sacred. When they all sat at the table, Jonathan realized it was the first time he'd had breakfast with all four daughters since his wife died. He'd been too busy, too broken, too afraid to sit in that empty space that used to hold love. But Amora had filled that void with warmth. Daisy looked at him and asked innocently, "Daddy, can we do this every day?" He hesitated, then smiled. "Yes, baby. Every day." Later that morning, Harper quietly approached Amora in the garden. "Miss Amora," she began, voice trembling slightly, "can I show you something?" Amora set down her watering can and nodded. Harper handed her a drawing, a family portrait. There were 5 figures, 4 girls, 1 man, and 1 woman. Amora blinked. "Honey, who's this next to your dad?" Harper's cheeks flushed. "It's you. You make us feel like we have a mom again." Tears filled Amora's eyes instantly. "Oh, sweetheart, that's the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me." Jonathan, who had been listening from the porch, turned away, hiding the emotion that cracked through his stoic mask. For the first time in years, his heart ached not from grief, but from gratitude. That night, he couldn't sleep. He went downstairs and found Amora folding laundry by the firelight. "You should rest," he said softly. "I'll rest when they are happy," she replied, her tone gentle yet firm. He watched her for a moment before saying, "You know, I hired you to help my daughters, but somehow you helped me too." Amora smiled faintly. "Maybe you just needed reminding that love isn't gone, sir. It just waits for us to open the door again." He chuckled. "You talk like a preacher." She shrugged. "Maybe just someone who's seen enough broken things get fixed." There was a silence between them, comfortable, full of unspoken warmth. Jonathan finally said, "Do you ever miss your own family?" She paused. "Every day. My mama raised me to believe serving others was never beneath anyone. But sometimes I wish I had someone to come home to after serving." He met her gaze. "Maybe you already do." Their eyes held for a long, quiet moment, until Daisy's sleepy voice broke the spell from the stairs. "Daddy, Amora, can I sleep in your room? I had a bad dream." Amora rose immediately. "Of course, baby. Come hey." Jonathan watched as Daisy clung to Amora's hand, and for the first time in forever, the mansion didn't feel empty. It felt like home. The next morning, the staff whispered about something strange. The once impossible Huxley mansion was alive. The air smelled of cinnamon, laughter, and music. The daughters hugged their father before school. Harper was smiling again. Even Jonathan looked human, not like the billionaire robot who once barked orders. And in the quiet moments, when no one was looking, he'd glance at Amora, the woman who had done the impossible. He'd think to himself, maybe miracles don't come in storms or thunder. Maybe they come in aprons, holding a spatula and a heart big enough to heal a family. It started with small things no one noticed at first. Jonathan began canceling meetings to spend time at home. He'd skip a board meeting just to attend Daisy's tea party in the backyard or to help Harper glue a paper crown. His assistant, alarmed, whispered into the phone, "Sir, the investors are waiting," but Jonathan only smiled and said, "For the first time, so is my family." The change spread like sunlight through the halls. The twins no longer hid behind their iPads. They baked cookies, fought over sprinkles, and laughed until flour covered their hair. Harper, who used to draw sorrowful faces, began painting gardens and sunrises. Even the housekeepers whispered in wonder, "Mr. Huxley smiles now." Amora watched all of it quietly. She didn't chase credit. She just folded laundry, kissed bruised knees, and sang gospel hymns at night, her voice wrapping the mansion in peace. One evening, Jonathan walked into the music room, drawn by the soft sound of the piano. Amora sat there, her fingers trembling over the keys, singing an old hymn that seemed older than pain itself. Musical note, amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Her voice cracked midway, tears spilling down her cheeks. Jonathan stepped forward, his voice low and careful. "You have a beautiful voice." Amora smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "I used to sing to my son like this, before I lost him." Jonathan froze. "You lost a child?" She nodded slowly, looking toward the moonlit window. "A car accident. 3 years ago. He was 9. Bright as the sun, full of jokes and songs. After that day, I thought my world ended. But God had other plans. He sent me here, to 4 little girls who needed a mother, and to a man who forgot he was still a father." Jonathan's throat tightened. He sat beside her without a word. For a long moment, neither spoke. The room filled only with the faint hum of the piano and the sound of 2 broken souls quietly mending. Finally, he whispered, "You gave my daughters back their laughter. Maybe you gave me back mine, too." Tears glistened on her lashes. "Sometimes, sir," she said softly, "God sends the broken to heal the broken." They sat together in the stillness, no barries, no roles. Just 2 hearts that finally understood each other. Days turned into weeks. Jonathan began inviting Amora to family dinners, no formalities, no distance. The girls would fight over who sat beside her, and Jonathan noticed how naturally she belonged there. One Sunday, he asked, "Amora, what do you do on your day off?" She smiled. "Mostly visit my church, maybe cook for the neighbors. Peace doesn't come easy unless you share it." He chuckled. "You're a remarkable woman." She shrugged. "Just someone who remembers what love looks like." That night, Harper presented something at dinner, a painting of the entire family. This time, there were 6 people, 4 little girls, Jonathan, and Amora standing in the middle with their hands on their shoulders. Jonathan's heart nearly burst. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." Harper smiled proudly. "It's our family now." The twins clapped. Daisy giggled. And Amora, she tried to laugh too, but her eyes brimmed with tears. She couldn't stop. Jonathan reached out and placed his hand over hers. "She's right, Amora. You are family." Her lips trembled. "You don't have to say that, sir. I'm just—" He interrupted, gently but firmly. "You're not just anything. You're the reason this house has life again." For the first time since his wife's death, he saw a flicker of warmth in Amora's eyes, the kind that heals, not hurts. One evening, Harper came running into Jonathan's office. "Daddy, Amora's sick." He bolted from his desk, heart racing. He found Amora sitting weakly in the kitchen, a hand on her head. "I just stood too long," she said softly, embarrassed. But Jonathan wasn't convinced. He called the family doctor, who arrived within the hour. After checking her, the doctor smiled. "She's fine. Exhausted, that's all. She's been working non-stop." Jonathan turned to her. "From now on, no more overworking. You rest. I'll take care of breakfast tomorrow." Amora laughed weakly. "Sir, have you ever cracked an egg before?" He grinned. "Guess I'll learn. You've taught me everything else." That night, the girls tucked her in, Harper reading a story while the twins fluffed her pillows. Daisy kissed her cheek and whispered, "You're our angel, Miss Amora." And as Amora drifted to sleep, she whispered back, "No, baby, you girls are mine." When Jonathan stepped outside later, the stars shimmered brighter than usual. He looked up and murmured, "Thank you." He didn't know if he was speaking to his late wife, to God, or to fate, but he meant it. Because somehow, a maid had done what no amount of wealth could ever buy. She had brought his family, and his heart, back to life. A year later, the mansion that once echoed with silence now pulsed with life. The same grand staircase that had felt cold and empty now overflowed with laughter, ribbons, and the scurrying of 4 little girls preparing for the day. The once stern staff smiled more often, humming along with the tunes Amora played in the kitchen every morning. Even the garden, once neglected and wilted, bloomed again under her care, bursting with color, like the house itself had finally learned how to breathe. Jonathan Huxley had changed too. The sharp edges in his voice had softened. His eyes, once weary with grief, now carried light. He spent less time in boardrooms and more time at the breakfast table, where the real deals of his life were made, deals of love, forgiveness, and family. It was Daisy's 6th birthday that morning, and the house buzzed with excitement. Streamers hung from the chandeliers, balloons filled every corner, and the kitchen smelled of chocolate cake and vanilla frosting. Amora moved gracefully among the chaos, laughing as the twins tried to frost the cake and ended up frosting each other instead. Jonathan stood by the doorway, watching her with quiet admiration. She had done what no one else could, what 100 trained professionals, doctors, and therapists couldn't. She had resurrected love in a house that had buried it. When the clock struck noon, everyone gathered in the sunroom for the celebration. Daisy, her curls bouncing with joy, climbed onto a little stool at the head of the table. She raised her juice glass and said in her tiny, determined voice, "I want to make a toast." Everyone chuckled, and Jonathan smiled. "Go ahead, sweetheart." Daisy's eyes sparkled. "To Amora, the best mama we could ever ask for." The room went silent. The only sound was the faint clinking of silverware against plates. Amora froze, her hand hovering above the cake knife. Her lips trembled, and her eyes filled with tears that shimmered like morning dew. Jonathan stood slowly, heart pounding in his chest. He looked at his daughters, then at Amora, the woman who had saved them all. His voice wavered as he said softly, "She's right." Amora's eyes widened. "Sir, I." He stepped closer, taking her trembling hands in his. "Amora Johnson," he said, his voice breaking, "you came here as a maid. You were supposed to take care of my children, but you ended up taking care of me too. You taught us how to live again, how to laugh again, how to love again. You became our miracle." The girls were now gathered around them, their little eyes wide with hope. Jonathan took a deep breath. "Amora, will you stay with us? Not as a maid, but as part of this family." The air felt sacred. Even the wind seemed to pause. Amora's tears finally spilled over as she whispered, "Yes, Mr. Huxley. Yes, I will." The room erupted in cheers. The girls screamed and hugged her tightly, their arms wrapping around her waist and legs. Daisy buried her face in Amora's apron, giggling through tears. "I told you she's our mama." Jonathan laughed, the sound warm and full, a sound the walls hadn't heard in years. That night, the house was quiet again, but not the lonely kind of quiet, the peaceful kind that follows joy. Jonathan walked into the living room and found Amora sitting by the fire, mending one of Daisy's stuffed toys. He smiled softly. "Still working?" She looked up, eyes glowing in the flickering firelight. "Always something that needs a little fixing." He sat beside her, watching her hands move with patience and care. "You know," he said quietly, "you did the impossible." Amora looked at him with gentle eyes. "No, sir," she whispered, setting the toy aside. "We did." He reached over, taking her hand in his, not as an employer, but as a man who had finally found the missing half of his home. In that moment, the mansion no longer felt like a monument to wealth. It felt human, alive, whole. Weeks later, the news spread quietly through the town. Jonathan Huxley, the billionaire who fired 101 nannies in 4 months, now calls his former maid his family. But for Jonathan, it wasn't a headline, it was redemption. For Amora, it wasn't a promotion, it was purpose. And for 4 little girls who once cried themselves to sleep, it was simply home. Each evening, as the sun dipped beyond the garden, they'd gather by the piano where Amora sang soft hymns, Harper on one side, the twins giggling on the other, and Daisy snuggled against her shoulder. Jonathan would stand behind them, smiling quietly, thinking to himself how one woman with a humble heart had rebuilt a broken empire, not with money, but with love. As the last note of Amora's song filled the air, Jonathan whispered, "You know, Amora, I used to believe money could fix everything." She smiled, her eyes glistening with peace. "Money builds walls, sir. But love builds homes." He nodded, his voice tender. "Then thank you for giving me a home again." And as the fireplace flickered and laughter echoed through the grand halls, the house that had once forgotten how to love finally remembered. The impossible had happened, not through power or wealth, but through the quiet grace of a woman who believed that love could heal anything.